Lucia is advancing its digital evolution and reinforcing its role as a forward-looking participant in regional e-government innovation. Allow me to welcome our esteemed panelists for this discussion. Mr. Marlon Narcis, he is the Director of the Division of Public Sector Modernization, DPSM. Mr. Cleveland Thomas, ITU Area Representative for the Caribbean. And Mr. Devendra Ramnarine, Digital Transformation Advisor and Independent Consultant. So the way this discussion will go, each panelist will have 5 minutes to really present on the topic. And then the moderator, myself, I will ask a few questions, and it'll be the turn of you, our audience. Have your questions ready, your burning questions ready to pose to our panelists. So let's start off by getting to know each other. So Mr. Narcis, I start off with you. Tell me just a little about your bio, who you are, and particularly in this field.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. And Glenn, thank you very much for hosting our panel discussion. And to my two esteemed colleagues, thank you for sharing this platform with me. Again, my name is Marlon Narcis. I'm the Director for Public Sector Modernization. And I really started off my career in government in 1998 as the Network Administrator at the Ministry of Education. At the time, we essentially focused on the establishment of computer labs across the education sector. When I entered the system, we only had 1 or 2 labs, actually, one at the convent and one at the St. Mary's College. And on my departure in 2006, we implemented over 30 labs at the secondary school level and another 50 labs at the primary school level. So we've been doing a lot of work since 1998. I then moved on to Office of the Prime Minister, where we implemented the ICT and e-government project, focusing more on the implementation of policy and strategies to support the overall digital transformation space, looking at the legal and regulatory framework, and that's why I actually got involved in a lot of the review of the, in fact, not even the review, the initial development of the legislation, namely the data protection, e-transactions, and computer misuse more specifically. We also focused slightly on the sharing of information, but at the time there was not an appetite for that. And then I moved on to public service, focusing again on more strategy and policy development, which has led me here today as the Director for Public Sector Modernization, and really trying to lead that charge towards advancing St. Lucia's digital transformation agenda, focusing not only from the public service level, but also at the national level as well. So again, I want to thank you for being here today to participate in this panel discussion. I look forward to a fruitful discussion throughout the afternoon.
And we move to Devendra, and Devendra is coming to us out of Trinidad and Tobago. Devendra, tell us about your journey, your digital journey. I know you have a whole perfect, I think you look like you were in the cricket team and everything else, but I don't know all of that part.
Yeah, okay, I'll be brief. So over the last couple decades, I've been working in public sector transformation driven by technology. I was fortunate about 12 or 15 years ago to have worked on the first national strategy for St. Lucia and on its refresh. I've done a lot of work in national ICT strategic planning, and more recently I worked on the identity management systems, interoperability frameworks, data center design, and using technology for creating export of software, focusing primarily on open source software.
All right, and then it's the turn of Cleveland. So tell us about yourself.
So good afternoon to all of you. I am Cleveland Thomas. I am the head of the International Telecommunications Union. Our office headquarters for the Caribbean is in Barbados. So most of you who know me, first thing I always say is that I am a minister of the gospel. Apart from being the head of the UN agency for the Caribbean in the ITU, I minister the gospel. And that to me is extremely important. My history behind is simply that I'm a chartered accountant by profession, but beyond that, my master's is in policies, legislation, regulation, and ICT. I spent some time in being in TSTT, senior official there as the operator in Trinidad and Tobago. I also work as Trinidad and Tobago's National Chief Information Officer. And at the same time, beyond that, we established the first government agency for implementation of all of ICT. Since then, I'm with the ITU for the last 16 years. I just turned 62 years, so I believe I'm a pensionable age, and therefore anybody giving me trouble, I know what to do with. I'm of age to do that. But all in all, I think we would have a good afternoon this evening together. Yes?
Okay, I'll have to start preaching the gospel to look like you as long as you roll back the years. So, as I said, each panelist will also make a short presentation so that it edifies you as to, on this topic of sovereignty. So we start off with Marlon. Marlon, you go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. So I will go quickly through a 5-slide presentation that will focus on data sovereignty, but more specifically to focus on a concept that we spoke of earlier this morning as it relates to data embassies. Ouch. There we go. So data sovereignty in the context of St. Lucia, essentially focusing on 4 main areas: the legal sovereignty, technical, cyber, and economic. But as I said, for the purpose of my presentation and the discourse, we will focus more primarily on the data embassies. The principle that data generated by, about, or within St. Lucia, especially government and citizens' data, is governed, stored, processed, and protected in accordance with the laws of St. Lucia. So that's the primary underpinning mandate of a data embassy. And so we will have some more discussion on this on this premise. Ouch. Okay. So what is a data embassy? That's a concept where a country securely stores copies of its critical national data and digital infrastructure in another country. Similarly to when you have an embassy for St. Lucia in another country, right? So there is legal viability, sovereign control, bilateral and multilateral treaties. Again, there must be this political underpinning to allow for the data embassy concept to work. And there are dedicated network and infrastructural links that would facilitate such an embassy or a data center. So our goal is to essentially establish a national data center in St. Lucia, in partnership with our Taiwanese colleagues as well, where we will have specific modular racks set up in such a way that it would be sovereign to whichever country that hosts its data in those racks. We also have to ensure that we have the underlying infrastructure, where there's our fiber optic cables connecting those buildings, and to ensure that there is redundancy for both data, for connectivity as well as electricity, to facilitate that sovereign capacity. But 2 other things that really underpins this. One would be the single ICT space concept that has been discussed over the years at the sub-regional level, and also the whole idea of IXPs. We want to be able to keep our data local and within the national space of the region, to ensure that within that single ICT space, we have the ability to be sovereign and to have control of our data. And St. Lucia as a government actually has had several opportunities to really move in that direction, but more specifically, over the last 3 or 4 years, focusing on our financial management systems, for example, DigiGov, the treasury systems, even those systems that we've implemented for the cabinet, there has been a consideration, but where should we store our data? Can we trust our data to be stored in the United States or in Europe? And so we've had to come up with, outside of the overarching policy framework for that, we have had to come up with some ingenious ways to satisfy the requirements, of our political class, to ensure that even despite of putting our data out there, there is some level of protection for us, and ensuring that the data is protected, whether it's through a hybrid solution where the data is outside, but we back it up on a daily basis, or whether we have redundancy of that data across multiple jurisdictions to ensure that there is always an opportunity for us to get access to that data. So essentially what we're trying to do now at the sub-regional level with the data embassies is to bring that control closer to us as small sovereign nations in the Caribbean. So to end my presentation, I just want to say that we must look forward to an all-inclusive, sustainable, equitable, and responsible, said Lucia. Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Marlon. And so we move to Cleveland. And Cleveland, your presentation, 5-minute presentation, so that we explore.
Okay, so for those who are not familiar with us as the ITU, we are the UN agency that specializes in technology. Our mandate has to do with connectivity of the world. We believe it's a basic right of all persons to be connected to each other. And even though we have probably to date in our measurement close to 6 or so billion people connected, we have as much as 2.9 billion people that remain unconnected. So our drive is to work with that connectivity. And we should mention that even though we have so many people connected, globally we have what you call digital ghosts. Digital ghosts. They may have internet connection, but there is no way of proving who they are. So while you have mobile coverage, even high numbers in St. Lucia, almost every single person has a phone, probably 2 phones in the country. We have a number of people who cannot be validated. And the question is, what do we do and why not? What are some of the challenges that you have with persons who are not connected? And this is where we within the ITU are working with administrations to help bridge that gap. The idea for us is that in recognizing the launch of the NF, the story changes a lot for those persons who are unconnected, persons in rural areas, those persons who make long journeys to get government services, etc. online. We recognize that the work being done right now by the St. Lucia administration is really a leap forward. I think it would be useful also to share with you that one of the things we measure, because this morning we heard of trust and data sovereignty and so forth. The ITU, we measure something called the ITU Global Cybersecurity Index. We measure the extent to which the country has many of its reports, it is digitally safe, etc. St. Lucia, we have determined that it is under Tier 4. We have different tiers, Tier 4, 3, 2, and 1. 1 being the highest level that a country can achieve, 4 being perhaps the lowest level, speaking to evolving. And that surrounds a lot to do with where St. Lucia is quite strong, like other Caribbean countries, as it relates to laws. But when it comes to digital skills and stuff like that, when talking about the technical areas outside of it, and cooperation, international cooperation, there is some work to be done. So what we have been doing, apart from just the NAF, the ITU, we have been engaged in a number of digital guardians, or what we call guardrails. Recently, I was here for probably a couple weeks in November, where we are working with the administration on the digital financial services. We're also working on the early warning for all system, as much as we are looking at the cell broadcasting which is coming forward. You would hear a lot of those things when we go through the session with the discussion later on, but only to say here that a fundamental point as we move to the NAF is the ITU has the global responsibility for standardization, world standardization in terms of security, and so much more to make sure that you are able to take your passport, and when you go to another country and any other form of identification, it is standardized, it's recognized, it's acceptable, meeting certain minimum requirements. So briefly, we'll speak to a few other items, but just thought I'll give you a touch on the global side of things from an ITU perspective.
Thank you very much, Cleveland. And now, Devendra.
Thanks. Could you just bring the presentation up? Thank you. Could you just move the slides forward? One more. One more. Right. Now, you would have heard quite a bit from me this morning, so I'll try and keep mine a little bit shorter. We talk about the benefits of becoming a digital citizen and why you may want to join and become a member of the NAF. I wanted to touch on one sector in particular, the social sector, the sector where the elderly, people who are not able to afford certain things, get benefits from the state. And I wanted to just use that sector as illustrative of what the kinds of benefits you have, and just briefly some of the challenges you may encounter in trying to provide services to that sector. One of the things that becoming a member of NAF, and some of the things that Cleveland talked about, where you have cellular coverage or coverage, Wi-Fi coverage, so that everybody literally has the opportunity to be connected. So rather than having the person come to the government offices, social workers, people who work in that sector can actually go out to that sector. And because you are uniquely identified through the NAF, they are pretty sure they are dealing with the right person at that point in time. So the whole idea of using the technology to move the service from the public offices to the citizen and deliver it at their home, particularly when you start talking about people who are getting along in age. The second big challenge that you have is that we tend to treat people who seek social benefits as something that maybe to some extent freeloaders, and that is in fact not so. These are things that they're entitled to either in law or a healthy state will provide those kinds of services. Using the NAF in order to get services removes that stigma, because you don't need to know the person's social stage. You don't have to come and join a line and everybody say, hey, there's somebody trying to get a benefit. You can do a lot of that online. So that reduces the whole stigma of people not wanting to access a service to which they're legitimately entitled to. The other major area that the NAF can offer to that sector is seeing the whole of the person. So often, at least I know in some of the countries I work in, government is not very good at communicating, so you're actually not aware of what benefits you're entitled to. So you tend to hear it by word of mouth. If the rules and the criteria for you to get a benefit is there, and you know this individual, you have access to their birth records, you know their entitlement, they don't need to know that they're entitled to it. The state knows they're entitled to it. And if that person is uniquely identified, you can push the services to them. So by seeing that whole of person view, the equity in accessing social benefits to everyone who is entitled, it becomes a lot easier. You will have to address the issue, of course, as you get elderly, and you may not be able to manipulate the device or use the app or to register, to find a way using the NAF to have a family member or a friend designated as an agent of that individual. And because you would know who that individual is, you can, and you have some handshaking between the two, so the person is able to log on in some systems just using their face, like logging onto an iPhone, and that authorizes the party to do the transaction on their behalf. So becoming a member of the NAF opens up the opportunity for you to treat every single citizen equitably and to give them what they're entitled to the benefit that the state is providing to them. And of course, other benefits can be treated with similarly.
So thank you so much, gentlemen, for those opening presentations. But I'm from, a farming community. I don't know much about ICT. And I am accustomed of seeing government open up tangible things. The St. Jude Hospital, a new fire station. How would you convince someone of the importance of this NAF and this activity? I see you ready to go to the mic, and then Marlon, you could always respond afterwards. You want Marlon to go first?
Yes, so we have a policy of inclusion as part of our digital transformation in St. Lucia. So with regards to the NAF and the availability of the government or DigiGov to provide support, we do have the DigiGov Service Bureau. With our colleagues in Taiwan, we've established digital centers where we also have a DigiGov component for persons who are not familiar, who cannot use technology, but still need that access to government services. They can go to those centers to request the service from trained persons who are at those centers to provide that support.
Yeah, but how do you convince me that this is as big today, what has happened today is as big as open up a hospital? What would you say to somebody so that they now are convinced that they need to register, they need to participate? Give me one hook line that you think will convince them that they need to participate. Devendra, what has happened in Trinidad that you think has... Before
Devendra answers, I can say, well, we've offered a tablet and a phone. We didn't get much interest in the start. Let's see how it goes at the end. Yeah.
So one of the, and we're dealing particularly with the farming community, one of the things in Trinidad, and I'm dealing specifically with Trinidad, is that the farming community, because we don't depend that much on agriculture, as a result of which we import a lot of food, which is not something that is sustainable. We need to have food security by getting the agricultural sector to grow. A consequence of that, government provides a lot of benefits. So if you buy a pickup in order to transport things, you get a government subsidy. There are a whole range of subsidies, fertilizers, seeds, refurbishing a cocoa estate so that you could produce more chocolate, which is now, I think, I forget how many thousands of US dollars per ton. So we also know that the fraud in providing those benefits is very high. If we can make it easier for a citizen through the NAF, because we know who you are, we can connect up to the Ministry of Agricultural databases, we could connect up to the tax offices so we can know whether you pay your taxes and all that, and we can make it relatively trivial for you to register from your phone to get your benefit. It becomes a little bit more attractive for you to want to participate. So one of the many things that's been done in Trinidad is to allow you to register remotely online and give you your benefits without all of the runaround. Rather than 6 to 8 months while we validate all the paperwork, we could cut that down to 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks. And that makes it more attractive for you to get into farming. If you're supposed to get a subsidy when you export something, we could connect up to customs. Once it leaves the boat or it leaves the plane, you automatically get your refund. Those kinds of things. We could only automate those things if we're sure it's going in the right bank account. Else we want you to come and pick up a check. We want to see you, we want to eyeball you, we want to make sure you're the right person. Those challenges disappear. We can automate everything. And we even looked at, I was trying to get IDB to pay for it, to use blockchains where at the recipient end, when you receive the cocoa, you can trigger the payment through electronic contract and the money goes straight into your account. So I mean you can go from simple to very complex.
Okay, you wanted to contribute to this, Cleveland?
Yes. For the first time I saw a guy who gave his song earlier. I don't know him.
Ezra.
So what's his name?
Ezra.
Ezra.
Defund Machine. Yes. That was the whole name.
It's people like him that we have to use, influencers and others who can speak the language of those persons on the ground. When he sings his song and dances to that music and does whatever he has to do, he might be able to capture a certain type of people. Similarly for businessmen, it's a different group, totally. you need to probably have incentives to get that businessman to know, even if it is for a period, you're reducing their tax, or you give them, whether it's a computer or something of this sort. I think it's having that language channel in such a way and directed to the person that is in need. Most of the time, people don't trust, and they don't trust certain groups. In some places, I don't know for St. Lucia, it may be that their trust for government is more than the private sector, or vice versa. And how do we do that? How do we bring it together? I think building that awareness, using the right people and targets, and also finding some way of making it work for the message. Sometimes it's not just the message, sometimes it's the messenger. And I think that's a way in which you could get that person from the agriculture field or health or anywhere else. I think that kind of shaping can help attract a lot more towards the field.
So, the issue of trust that you've brought up. So, some people, they have a natural distrust for government, for whatever the reason is. But they will trust Google. They will sign onto their phones and they will put all their information in there. Is that a challenge that the authentication platform would have to overcome, that persons may not see why they need to sign onto the platform since there are so many other tools that are available?
Okay, well, I would say access to government services is important. And one of the things that we're doing with the NAF is leveraging other social needs. So Devin just spoke earlier about the specific social aspect. We are working with the Ministry of Health because the government is about to launch universal health coverage. And I think everybody wants to have universal health coverage. So we're leaning with those partners to assist with the registration, and then also then showing person what benefit that they can derive from not just the registration for the universal health coverage, but also what immediate benefit and the convenience that comes with the NAF and the different aspects to which they can work with us. So essentially, it's a two-way street where, hey, we give you information, we make you knowledgeable of the pros and the cons, and at the same time, we're showing you the benefit in the service that you could access, whether it's directly through DigiGov or whether it's for the access to get the universal health coverage, which is very important for a person's life.
So as Devindra, you were saying, if you attach benefits and real benefits, particularly financial benefits, you have hopefully the chance of greater participation.
Yeah, I want to add another benefit. And again, this one is the Trinidad example. Is it on?
Yeah.
Yeah. And this one deals with crime. And perhaps moving away from simply having government being the driver of the adoption of the NAF to moving to small business folks, the SMEs and other small software developers. So one of the big challenges we had, I'm just going to give you two quick examples. One had to do with getting into a maxi taxi and getting kidnapped. The crime is a lot worse in Trinidad than it's elsewhere in the Caribbean. So what this particular individual came up with is a mobile app. There's a QR code on the vehicle. You want to tie the QR code in the vehicle to the driver, and you want to tie the QR code to the vehicle number, which requires the owner of the vehicle to register on the NAF. It requires the driver to register on the NAF. Mm-hmm. It requires the connection between the mobile phone through the interoperability platform to both databases, so that what you do as a citizen, you have to register at the NAF. You open up the app, and this actually works. The guy is trying to roll it out in Arima. You open up the app, you identify yourself to the app, you scan the QR code on the vehicle. In it pops up the picture of the driver. Is that the right driver? Pops up the picture of the number plate. Is that the right number plate? And now I know I'm driving in a vehicle who, because I am now registered in the app, if something happens, we know the owner of the vehicle, we know the driver. And then you build other features on it, panic buttons as you go along, regular SMS updates to the party that you're going home to. Right. And simply, that is only possible because of the use of the unique identification from the app and the interoperability platform and the interconnections to the vehicle database, the driver's database, and to your authenticator system on the app. So government didn't have to do it. Government opened that up, and then that solution is quite powerful. And just one quick other one, if I may. We have a lot of rideshare applications that have developed, but people keep getting kidnapped. Again, you basically use the app, you say, I want somebody to pick me up, and you take them to some remote community, and you rob them, take their phone, their money, throw them out. If the person who is the passenger is uniquely identified on the NAF, you know who the person is. You have their picture, you have their ID, you know where they live. You're not going to do that kind of thing. Right now, you're anonymous. So open up the ecosystem to the hundreds of young people in this country who could knock these apps up in next to no time and promote it through their local, as Cleveland say, influences the right people. And you create a self-sustaining ecosystem that does not require investments from government.
So you're saying that the NAF strengthens law enforcement and public safety while representing or respecting civil liberties, because then you'll have a clear indication of who it is, and probably even know who the driver is, as you're saying, and so it's easy to identify missing persons.
So even before you get into the vehicle, you check the picture of the person. Now, for you to get that QR code, you have to agree to this. So the driver picture pops up. So I'm checking the driver is the right driver attached to that vehicle. That vehicle is properly registered, and I'm telling the system I am going in that vehicle.
So, Marlon, then that leads me to think that this has to be, and you could answer as well, Cleveland, that ecosystem has to be solid. The silos that we have currently have to be broken. As was said this morning, we have to destroy silos, because for this to work, not only do you need voluntary participation, but I think you need legislative backing for it.
Yes, most definitely. And just as Devendra was speaking, this is the exact thing that DigiGov is pursuing, right? So even in that exact case that you mentioned, we have the transport databases on DigiGov. The police are now using that to query for licenses and vehicle registration. We also have the registry of companies on there as well. So all of these interconnections are there. Is how do we then innovate and make the types of social connections, if you want to say that, to add more benefit and more value. And we have a term where you say value-added services that we want to allow for innovation on top of that. And essentially it's providing our private sector access to those, to that DigiGov data, so that they can, mine it, if you want to say that, so that we can have additional value coming out of the system.
When you talk, I'm going to tie what the last question on this. When we talk about the average person being comfortable with the Google, trusting Google compared to governments and others, and I think recently we were also discussing that even when you go abroad and you have to give your biometrics and you put your thumb out there to enter the United States, the United Kingdom, etc., people walk away comfortably. They don't, isn't that so? Yeah? No? Generally, people, even if they have to give it, they give it without concern. But when it's local, most of the time, you understand the concern is there. And as I was saying before, when you talk about Google and Amazon and so on, they are dealing with 6 billion or 4 billion people. But when it's local, people know who you are. The chances of looking at you and finding out about you, there is a greater need for attention from some people. And that's why there's a distinction between trust and surveillance. Because when we talk nationally, people believe that they are surveyed. They believe their information can be used against them. Google has no time with you and me, with 1 billion people, and therefore there's a greater level of comfort. But go back to the ecosystem, I think most of us watch the technology and there's a level of concern with it. But that is only 20% of the whole system. We still have to deal with the things of doing the normal things that we need to do and be careful. Despite the best technology, if you are not going to be changing your password or have dual or triple authentication or not sharing it or even having the skills to do it. Somebody went to an ATM machine, senior, they forget their password and they ask somebody at the machine to help them to withdraw the money, you know, and giving the person their password and walking away. Some simple things we have to look at. So to me, I believe that it is not only that aspect of it. It's how do we then train the person? How do we engender that kind of skill and development and spend time to build the system overall? The technology is there, it will work as much as we will help it or design it to work, but we as individuals, I think there is so much more we still have to do and be prepared to do.
I wanted to add something, and this really will address the issue of government sharing data. I think we have to be careful in the presumption that when we say government is sharing data, they're giving it to somebody. So there are lots of techniques that does not require government to give you anything. So for example, I don't know if you card people when they go into a bar in St. Lucia. You probably don't. We don't do it in Trinidad either. But if you went to a bar in the UK and you're looking young, like 62-year-old Cleveland, they probably will ask him to show he's over 18. Now, what do you typically do? Pull out your driving license and you show them your address, you show them your date of birth, you show them all kinds of things, whether you need to wear spectacles, your blood type, a whole bunch of things, whether you're donating your body in an accident. None of those things are relevant to the point. What you simply are able to do with the technology, the person asks government, is this person, right? And you could do it through the face, you could do it a number of things, over 18 or not. They don't give you anything other than a yes or no. So you never get any data back. So if I was to take the example I told you about the motor vehicle, when I take a picture of the QR code and I take a picture of the face, technically speaking, you can ask if you had the face at the other side, if that face is attached to the vehicle, and you get back a yes or no. Rather than, if people don't trust it, putting out a picture of the face of the person. So you use a lot of yes, no. Does this vehicle, because your next date is the Toyota Corolla, whatever, is that vehicle attached to that number, and you get yes, no. So you can use validation where the person is in front of you, they present the ID card, you key in the ID card information, valid or not valid. The state never gives you anything. When you present an ID to the bank, you are telling the bank, check it and make sure it's correct. At this point, all they could do, it doesn't look like a fake. It looks real. With that validation coming back yes or no, the state gave you nothing. You had it already. It just told you yes or no. So you can use yes-no validations to remove the stigma of the state giving you anything. And when you use that in combination, you could do some very powerful things with zero data being given from the state to the third party. So just bear that in mind.
Yeah. So with this in mind and what was indicated, what are some of the key security features built into NAF to protect citizens' data? That is one. And then I'm linking it with what you were talking about the ID. There has been a discussion about biometric authentication and technologies such as AI-driven facial recognition. How is government ensuring these technologies are secure and ethically deployed? And how soon do you anticipate this service probably to be added to the NAF if it has been a thought already?
Yeah, so with the NAF, it's a free-phase process. So we're now launching the component of NAF for citizens and residents. There is a business component for businesses and companies, and then we'll focus on NAF as a service where government could now provide authentication services to the private sector, our financial institutions, etc. So when you ask also what are the security features associated built into the system? Yeah, so I cannot speak specifically to the specific technologies that we have, but the system is monitored 24/7, and we do have the basic things that we may all know here, like SSL certificates to protect, to show that it's a secure website, etc. One of the main things that we do, especially for the back-end process, you cannot conduct a back-end process outside of the Government of St. Lucia website, network. So for example, today, since we're offering that service here, you needed to VPN into the government network to be able to access the data in the first place, right? And then obviously we have a lot of cybersecurity features with our firewalls, etc., and multi-factor authentication. So there is a robust cybersecurity apparatus behind DigiGov to ensure that we protect business data, and that is very critical in the whole idea of trust. But just going back quickly to what Devendra and Cleveland were speaking about, I think it comes back to the whole idea of culture, right? And we've seen that time and time again with the implementation of DigiGov, where persons are not interested until it impacts them directly, right? So, and this is one of the reasons actually why, if you remember this morning, those persons who were here this morning, we showed 3 options to apply for the NAF. You have as an existing user, a new user, and the regular account, because we know that St. Lucians, we're always late with doing everything, and even when the system provides feedback, provides notifications, somebody may want to renew their driver's license because it expired last week. We don't want them applying for a NAF account because we need to do our back-end verification. So we're still providing you with the opportunity to do a regular basic account to quickly access the system to get the service that you require. So a lot of time it comes back down to the culture, and that is where we have found the most difficulty actually in the implementation and the rollout of the system.
Okay, just wanted to add a couple of things where the idea of offloading the complex problem to the technology and less so the citizen. So I'll touch on the first, because as you get older, the user interface of putting in and typing in a username and password, somebody looking over your shoulder, as Cleveland alluded to, looking at your PIN or giving people your PIN to help you take money out is a source of problem. So one of the designs that I worked on and the country is implementing it now is to use your face as the authentication plus a 6-digit PIN. So literally what you do when you open the app, you look at so you link yourself into the library of routines that iPhone and Android has that does your face authentication to sign on. That is accessible through the app. So you literally look at the phone and the phone signs you in. So only the person who is in front of the phone is able to access the service. Part of the other thing that we knew that that particular solution would have, people didn't trust government to take the picture. So what we did is, rather than store the picture anywhere, which requires legislation, and you have to create a whole thing to capture biometric data. In Trinidad, for example, it's only the police and passports allowed to capture biometric data, which is mostly fingerprints. Everybody else, it's not allowed. So what is done is, when you take the picture, it's converted into a irreversible biometric hash that is proven to be unique, and the hash is stored. You can't go from the hash to the face. So you're basically telling citizens, when I register with my face, nobody keeps the face. But that hash is unique, so therefore I could deduplicate you and to know that you only exist in a system once. But where it gets very powerful is logging on through either single sign-on or standardized sign-on. So every government portal has a QR code. You open the app, you point the app at the QR code, you use your face to log on and open the app. And because your face is already told to the app, that is told through your hash to the system, and the system logs you in. So literally you do nothing other than look at the phone and log on to a government website by scanning QR codes, and that design works already. So not very complex. The idea was complex, but the execution of it was straightforward. So now any person, regardless of the age, who can look at a phone and open the phone can log on to a government website and be uniquely identified, because that thing is linked to your NAF. So I would suggest that Marlon adds that as the front end sitting on the phone, right? And therefore it's not sitting on the government side, and therefore the issue of data privacy and stuff doesn't arise.
Just to add that when we talk about the NAF and your identity, and coming from the international telecommunication and the rest of the world, remember your identity is not only within the boundaries of St. Lucia. Your ID card, you don't want it to be just useful within your country. What about within CARICOM? What about when you go beyond CARICOM? How can it be used and used singly? And that's where compliance with international recommendation and standards are critical as part of the design of your NAF. And in that regard, within the ITU, with custodian for those standards, we have clear standards that speaks to the Standardization Bureau of the ITU, making certain recommendations that in the design of it, those things are taken into account because you go beyond the boundary of your own country and you wanted to measure what that international standard is. You want them to operate, and you also want them to recognize anomalies, etc., alerts, and all the things. I will not go into the names of some of those recommendations, but when you do have time, just look at the ITU-T-X recommendations for compliance. And those we talk about speaks to the likes of protection, authentication. It speaks, and you would see numbers like 1254, 509, etc. Important because it will tell an administration if they are in compliance. What are the rules? And this is where the NAF in itself had to take its own measurement as a tool to guide it in its design. So all of that I'm saying is to bring some level of confidence that if it is workable internationally, then here there should be little, I mean, you ain't going to absolve all the concern, but you do have a compliance that it meets those for Singapore as much as the US and other parts of the world. It's just a matter of ensuring that it comply with those standards and recommendations.
Just before you come in, so in line with what you're saying, and hopefully you could build on that, so are you saying that the NAF can position St. Lucia for regional interoperability across CARICOM even, and further afield? Or how far can it go? Is it because it is our national framework, but how far can this go in terms of being something that will be recognized even out of St. Lucia?
Again, it is based on a country and its agreements. You may have agreement, just like we saw recently with the free movement of people between Barbados and I think 3 or 4 other countries in the region. That means that you are going beyond your country. What are some of the agreements you have? Or some of the resolutions you pass, certain conventions that are being met, etc. And how do you tie it in with other kinds of agreement? I cannot speak to St. Lucia and how far it will go, but the reality is that I would like to believe that for any administration, you are not doing all of this and protecting all of that because international cooperation is needed. If somebody is delinquent or done something illegally, you want to be able to get the cooperation of any other government to help you. Because most likely they will not be living here. They might be very well using a similar identity, false or otherwise, in another part of the world, and you want that link to know exactly who we're dealing with.
Yeah, I just wanted to expand on that use of international standards, which I'm pretty sure Marlon is already doing. If we were, in fact, doing that, then interconnecting the two systems of two countries becomes trivial because you're following international standards. We know, for example, the immigration system in St. Lucia, because I fill out the forms online, is already connected to your interoperability platform, because that's, I assume, how you're able to store certain things. And therefore, the immigration system is accessible through the technology. If Barbados, and I'm just picking Barbados at random, already has an interoperability platform, they use a version of X-Roads from a company called Cybernetica in Estonia. If they already have their own ID and they have launched it a couple of years ago, there's nothing stopping you technically other than the political will and the framework agreements between at the political level, that a St. Lucian walks into Barbados. Now, forget the kiosk, but even if you were to use the kiosk, you just go into the kiosk, and that picture is taken, and the immigration system from Barbados, through their X-Roads, through interconnection, through a secure connection to St. Lucia, through the interoperability platform, to the immigration system, pull all the data at source, not using the passport, which could be faked, and populate the registry and flags it as no checks, you're not wanted by anybody, and literally you walk straight through to customs. And if you're able to tie the face, then literally as you're walking, the cameras, the technology in the US after a lot of the folks got shot in schools, this technology is common and cheap. Parents and guardians who have to pick up children in school, they register themselves and their face and their IDs. As they walk into the school entrance, the thing, it takes all it needs, I think, is a 20 by 20 pixels picture. The AI is that good. It looks you up in the database, verifies that you are an authorized party to pick up the child, and it allows you to walk through. If you are not an authorized person, technology flags you and pulls you aside. So you walk into Barbados, next increment, there's a camera at the door, and you go straight to customs. Because the technology built on your NAF registration and the interconnection through the interoperability platform and the standards that Cleveland alluded to allow that to work seamlessly. Free movement of people, and literally it's free. You have removed the border. And if you had agreements on custom stuff, then you could even walk straight into the country because you file your custom declaration up front. Pass it through some X-ray machines, and you know whether you have stuff you need to declare. The AI now can pick up what's inside of there, whether you brought fruits that you're not supposed to bring. So you can automate, and that's relatively low cost. Huh? That's not rocket science. That's technology that's perhaps old already.
Okay, so at this stage, we're going to open up for the floor to ask questions. There will be a mic to the back. Please utilize the mic if you wish to ask any questions. You'll be identified, and you could ask the questions. So as I see you, I will identify you, and your questions will be acknowledged. So with that being said, in terms of the NAF, how can the NAF stimulate digital commerce and fintech innovation in St. Lucia? Because we're talking about all those wonderful things that you could do on crime and security. I see how exactly it'll work. But in terms of the banking sector, new innovations that you want to introduce, can NAF simplify that for St. Lucia and create greater levels of innovation?
Yes. So we spoke earlier today about FinTech Sandbox. Some of us may be familiar with Penny Pinch as an indigenous company focusing on FinTech solutions. We also want to have Penny Pinch as a payment option on DigiGov, right? And it fits within our whole thrust towards digital financial services, right? So we want to be the, in that terminology, we call it KYC, Know Your Customer, and we can provide that support to Penny Pinch so that they can validate their users, and the users can be validated once they go to make a payment off DigiGov. We also want to be able to have DigiGov as NAF as a service through our own DigiGov app, right, which would function in a similar manner. And then, again, provide us with the ability to have a lot of the products of DigiGov on that app. So we no longer have to depend on a lot of the paper that comes out of the system right now. And so it's a gradual, slow maturity process. But going back to the regulatory sandbox, one of the things that we want to do as a pilot, because under the Caribbean Digital Transformation Project, the mobile app that we'll be going to be developing, there would be a requirement for identity management as well. So we want to use that project to facilitate the use of the sandbox to really understand how the technology works and what type of regulations that can be lowered or increased to provide that level of connectivity and allow for the innovation that can take place with that integration with the NAF.
So it depends on the creativity of our business community and how they wish to roll out tools. So Devendra, before you come in, I want Cleveland to come in. So Cleveland, from your global perspective, globally, what has been, what is the biggest digital gap that you've seen, particularly for small island developing states, for implementation of technologies such as this? And also, could you tell us whether there's been any jurisdiction in the region that has already started their a NAF, a similar NAF?
I mean, like in the beginning of my presentation, 5 minutes, I spoke about the extent to which there is connectivity and the extent to which there is this gap, and is the verification gap. That's the big one. Those persons who what we call digital ghosts. You have you have internet access, but you just do not have an ID of some presence of some kind. And we know still that even though St. Lucia has a high level of mobile penetration and over 70-something% for internet, still the extent to which people are utilizing it, probably based on costs, or the level of access in rural areas, whatever the inhibitors might be, that's a gap. Those persons who just are not having that connectivity to finance and other things. We have seen that. We have a lot of studies online. If you go to the ITU data dashboard and you just put in St. Lucia, you will see where St. Lucia is, and you are doing extremely well in some areas, and some areas you still need to do some work. Cybersecurity, very good in some areas, but like others, there are some work to be developed. How do you go about treating with that? I think I must commend St. Lucia for today and for this NAF initiative, because what you are doing is you are closing that gap. The components that measure St. Lucia being at tier 4 and now moving to tier 3 or tier 2, this is some of the things that you're doing. Having this conversation here and getting feedback is equally important for it. And I should also add, we are working with Marlon, and the government minister is here. We were here on your training the regulators on the mobile security app. The same thing I just said about Penny Pinch. Your regulators right now are working with the ITU and continue to train on how are these apps safe. When you put your money or you put your information over there, is it safe to say you're going to a party and pay for that online? And is it enough? And what are some of the things that would highlight? We are working with your administration on some of those things right now. And the government has expressed its concern, not because somebody developed an app and it's working that it's good enough. You know, you have to have it tested, and can we help you to do that? So we are doing that. And also we through the Marlon's group, to bring some level of comfort, there is the governance body that was created. This is the first time you are bringing finance, banking, the Digicel, the regulatory, the ministry all together to make sure that these things are complying with international standards, at the same time to make sure that people's information, it's safe. So those are some areas, and I believe that it will really augur well for St. Lucia. Who else is doing some of that? You all have, in the Caribbean region, a number of countries are already also on the same path. The challenge I find is that people tend to go it alone, trying to have that harmonized approach that, as Devendra eloquently said, you go into the airport and you have the benefit of just your face walking through without having to fill out forms. Some countries are far more ahead than others. Why is that not a common thing for the region, like most other things that you have? So I believe that is a way forward.
Yeah. Now, Devendra, you know about this facial recognition. So, just you tied in.
Before I go any further, I just wanted to expand on what
okay,
was saying, if I may. Yeah. So, the issue of financial inclusion can be linked to the NAF. You know, recently, well, not recently, it's a number of years ago, government, and this is the Trinidad example now, wanted to move away from checks. And you have 210,000 people get social benefits now. 110,000 people get old age pensions. So you could be producing a lot of checks. Checks get stolen, checks get lost. You can cash checks for things, for purposes other than intended. So benefits that should perhaps go to a child, a parent can use it to buy alcohol and cigarettes. So you wanted to control it a lot more. With the issuance of certain kinds of identity The government had to, in order to deposit stuff into a bank account, to reduce the KYC, so the banks will take one single ID and less information in order to allow a citizen to open a bank account. With the NAF, because you're properly identified, there's nothing stopping you working with the bank. Having a NAF should automatically entitle you to open a bank account. So that's the first thing. So everybody has bank accounts. We look at the model that India has, right? If you want to do micropayments, you want to pay for a car park, you want to buy something in the market, there's a QR code. And everybody does this now. And this is universal almost in India. You simply open your phone, scan the QR code, punch in the amount, 200 rupees, punch in your 4-digit PIN, and the money goes from my account into your account in real time. So with the NAF, if everybody is allowed to open a bank account, then all the micropayments is simply a matter of using your phone and scanning a QR code. Financial inclusion immediately. Government can now put payments, refunds directly into their account. It's not very complex. And then you open up the ecosystem and the sandbox for people to build on that basic connectivity. So you just need one bank to agree to have that connection and pilot it with that bank. Within a matter of 3 to 6 months with the launch of the NAF. Now, when we ask why would you want to take up the NAF? Because you no longer have to work with cash. Anything you want to buy, you know, buy KFC, point to the QR code, one 2-piece, and transfer how much EC it is. And you start developing killer reasons for people to want to take the NAF. The NAF ceases to be an abstract concept, right? And to me, you should find a really nice name, like Aadhaar is about identity. It's about the soul of you. That's the Indian word. Each of those words have something. If you brand it with something that belongs to St. Lucia, I am using me. This is something that's St. Lucian to make my payment. People gravitate to it a lot better. So you can get universality of financial inclusion, and people who don't traditionally want to become part of the sector will become part of the sector.
I think unless the incentive is tangible, and financial incentives are normally a quick way of drawing persons in, because if you get your payments done, get monies into your account, it makes it easier. And I think even before we were speaking, you were saying that if persons don't want to be part of the system, they could still, the manual approach is still available. It won't be eliminated, but they will recognize that if a payment via the NAF will take 2 days, it may take 2 weeks via the other system. And so that might be an incentive to say, hey, let me move and get my payment quicker. Now, with the whole issue that you mentioned of being able to walk through an airport and being easily identified, so many people fear digital ID equates to surveillance. How can governments distinguish between identity verification and state tracking? Is there a difference, or is it per institution, or is the NAF a surveillance tool as well?
Yeah. So I can address that. If government truly believes that that's what it wants to do, which most governments do, then by design, and I believe Marlon has already incorporated what I'm going to say in his design, although he hasn't explicitly mentioned it, what you do not do is allow any of the systems to track a transaction that moves from one agency to the next. So let me say what that means. If I am creating an interoperability framework piece of software that interconnects 2 ministries. So for example, if I want to sell a car, I need to check whether I'm VAT registered, if you had to pay VAT on it. And therefore, the vehicle registration system will check the VAT office and come back and say whether I'm registered or not. You could, in the central system, store that transaction. By design, you don't. So the initiator of the motor vehicle system stores its transaction. The interconnecting system stores nothing. All it knows is at 12:05 a.m. a transaction occurred. It doesn't know what the transaction is, who did it. And that's for audit trails and for tracing things. The VAT office will store whether or not it approved the transaction. Nobody stores both. For you to track, you literally have to get license office, VAT office, everybody to collude to track you. So by design, you make it very difficult to do. Yeah, the transaction, the design you started to talk about using your face. One of the reasons why you can do a lot of things automate is that you clean up your databases using the NAF. So I'll tell you what that means. I know for sure in a lot of systems, and I've looked at systems in several Caribbean countries, that you can exist more than once. There are friends of mine who have 2 driving licenses with 2 different names, same picture. There's no way the system knows that it's the same picture, but there is software that could do it. So you can clean it up by doing facial comparisons, using biometric hashing and comparisons. But assuming you don't even do that. When you present yourself to the NAF and your ID is checked once, and coming back to the facial biometric hash now, and I take your facial biometric hash and I store it on the phone, and I tie your ID to that hash, and I share the hash with the state. If you came a second time with your fake, it's not a fake ID, it's valid IDs, because you got 2 passports because you paid off somebody, you got 2 driving licenses because the system was manual. And I try to use the other 2 IDs, you'll get another NAF number because they exist in the databases. But when you try to put your face in a second time, your face already exists in the database. So the primary reason for using facial biometric hashes is to deduplicate your database. The NAF ID equivalent, you can only exist once. Even if you have 10 driving licenses and 10 passports, which is impossible, but if you did, the system will allow you to register many times. You just put different things. This deduplication allows you to allow the transaction to flow the way I described it. So you exist once and only once, you're tied to one and only one bank account, and your data is not moved off of your phone. So if your data is moving off the phone, the system is not storing it, you can't be tracked. So you can, as public officers, say, we cannot track you, even if you want to do that. Now, police may have different, they will make a relationship between all the parties, and they can do their stuff, but they will have the law to govern that. But any random person can't track it, just can't be done. And you can explain to the public, it is not possible. Our systems do not store it. And that's the way you get around that trust issue of tracking.
You wanted to go, Cleveland? Yeah, because I think at the core of this system, as we said, trust will allow more persons to sign on because then they believe that their data is protected. And in St. Lucia, I'll tell you, that's one of the hardest things that we constantly fight, collecting data. Persons wish not to share their data because they're not sure where their data is going and how they want to do it. And some of it is ignorance as well about, being able to collect data for their own purposes, so for their own development, to track their productivity and the like. So far less telling them that they need to put it on. So go ahead with your contribution.
Very quickly, the privacy by design is what Devendra has elaborated on. And to the extent that the NAF complies with that international standard, there are loads, at least 5. There's one golden standard that should bring comfort to St. Lucian for the NAF in compliance, and that golden standard speaks to personal ID information being shared, the ITU-T 1058, among others, that if the whole design meets that together with other standards in terms of, we have something called the release or the twin standards, personal third-party extension, etc. As long as you have those and it's designed within the system, then the issue of surveillance and others become very minimum overall. But just making reference to the fact that there are blueprints, toolkits that, if followed, will treat with the extent to which information can be shared for any other purpose other than what it was intended to do.
Okay. So before Marlon makes his contribution, I know we have a room full of persons who are IT savvy and who are very interested. There is still an opportunity for you to ask a question on the floor. Don't be afraid, just go to the mic and you could pose your question, and I'll acknowledge you once I see you at the mic. So Marlon, just make your contribution while they come to the mic.
So quickly, I just wanted to strengthen the point on duplication and deduplication. And one of the things that we experience in rationalizing the data, when we started the project essentially at the Transport Department, and one of the first things that we attempted to do was to look at the duplicates. There were plenty of them. I wouldn't give you the numbers. But what we recognized was that in spite of providing that awareness, the fact that the mindset there was about providing a service regardless, we still encountered some resistance. I think the other aspect of this entire process is the whole idea of change management and the amount of stakeholder engagement and retraining and sensitization that needs to take place. So that person understand what basically is a unique ID. You know, we've had challenges in that basic understanding. So I think that there is a paradigm shift that has to take place, and persons need to understand that, hey, identity is very, very important, and the uniqueness of a number has to go back to one individual or one vehicle or one engine or one chassis. So, you know, these are the things that need to be considered and are very, very important moving forward with the NAF.
Thank you very much. So we welcome our very first person at the mic. Just identify yourself and then go ahead with your question.
Good afternoon. Thank you. Can you hear me? Okay, wonderful. My name is Jasmine Weeks. Thank you for such a lively, enlightening discussion. I have been literally at the edge of my seat. I have one observation and one question. My observation is that it seems that much of the discussion here is about building trust and basically discovering ways to encourage the citizens to sign on to the NAF. My question is from a different stakeholder perspective. I am a young person. I am employed by the government. I am tech savvy. I have my online banking enabled, my Amazon account enabled. I am doing the works. However, I am very content with just presenting myself to work, shifting people around, and manually entering data into a database as per my job description. But when I listen to what your NAF presents, and I do a little bit of extrapolation and foresight, I realize your NAF seems to be the university graduate who might knock me out of my job, and I'm not very happy with your NAF. Because your NAF is now going to expose my inefficiency. It's also going to force me to have to learn something new. Have we considered this stakeholder group, and have we begun devising means of overcoming this possible hurdle? In addition to this young person, we have a policymaker, seasoned university graduate, been in the sector for quite some time. I sometimes call them dinosaurs, no offense to anybody. And I recognize the importance of your NAF. I recognize the benefits of it. I have already signed on and I am using it. However, I realize in order for it to be effective, it requires me to change what I already know, what I am doing, and I may actually have to now change the entire policy framework of my organization. And I am not really cut out for this work, or I am not really looking forward to that. I like business as usual. Has your NAF framework considered these two persons in the public service? Thank you.
Thank you so much. So I guess Marlon may start off with the response, but let me just say it's not your NAF, it's our NAF. Our NAF, yes. So you are actually a good person for us to look at and say, how do we get you to be more participatory in the process? What will attract you? What will make it better for you? So Marlon, let me try to
thank you very much. So with the implementation of DigiGov, we have a very strong change management for user adoption strategy. It has been, as I said earlier, the most challenging part of the implementation of DigiGov, changing that mindset of our public servants to really harness the benefits of technology. And I think that has also slowed down the implementation of the system, to be frank. And essentially, we were supposed to have been here 2 years ago with the NAF, but we have encountered so much resistance, as you said, persons not understanding the benefits, are not willing to even give themselves an opportunity to change. But we've also focused heavily on training as well, right? Not only in the use of the system and providing KPIs for usage of the system to ensure that, you know, we keep to in the whole purpose of reducing on transaction times and costs, but also to give persons a better appreciation for things like data privacy, ethical use of the system, because at the end of the day, there is still somebody who will interact with your data. But the flip side to that as well is that we find it so much easier for us to give an individual our data. So, Devendra, you spoke earlier about I needed to buy a vehicle from you. The transport department needs me to provide you with a physical copy of my ID. So that immediately gives you access to all of that data that you don't really need. You don't need to know my date of birth, where I live, for me to buy a car first to exchange that type of information. So you find that on the one hand, we get the resistance, but on the other hand, persons still continue to perpetuate in the same things that they're trying to resist at the same time. So it's a chicken and egg kind of situation, and over time we see, those barriers are breaking down. But again, it slows down the implementation, slows down the transactions, and even then, we have even certain persons who challenge the existing regulations that governs the operations of our different beneficiary agencies, because with the DigiGov application, you now have mandatory fields, as Joanne showed earlier, that are not subjective. If you don't put it, you can't go further with your application or with the process. So there are different challenges that we face, but at the end of the day, we see light at the end of the tunnel, and things are moving on as quickly as possible.
Yeah, so I guess the change management process just must be constant and continuous. Yeah. So we have another question on the floor. Yeah, just identify yourself, and then you can go ahead.
My name is Ernest Scholes.
Come closer to the mic, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Ernest Scholes. I'm a software engineer. I like to figure out how things work. So my question is for Devendra. I just want to know how your facial recognition would be able to distinguish identical twins. Does it work, and so on? I'm just curious about that. That's it.
So, and that was our primary concern in designing that particular solution. So the first thing that was done was to ensure we built the entire platform on open source software. So we had a lot of control of the technology, and we weren't reliant on a vendor to do the checks that we needed to become comfortable that it was doing what it needed to do. So we didn't have to go to a vendor and say, how are you handling twins? We could check it ourselves. So that was the first decision that was made. The second decision was made is that in procuring the AI, for converting the face to the biometric hash, you needed to be NIST certified, and you needed to be in the top 50 in the US NIST, National Institute of Standards and Technology in the US, which you can just Google, you'll see the list. You could only be a company in that top 50. We eventually had to make it 100, because we didn't have a lot of money and people were charging too much. But the first, you had to be in the top 100, and you had to have your database to show where your training came from. You had to show that you had sufficient people of Caribbean-type ethnicities that the software wasn't North American based and was only picking up people of a particular facial structure. So we did all of that, and we found a piece of software that fit the standards, tested by NIST, certified by NIST, that we were comfortable with the training data. We also got from 2 or 3 agencies that stored pictures, people like the Elections and Boundaries, and I'm just using random names because I don't want to cause problems with this. The passport folks, the folks with the driving license, they have pictures. And if they give you a lot of dead people that were not there to think, you can use it to further train the software, and you're pretty sure it's localized for your. So what you have is a piece of software there that's saying it will distinguish between triplets. They'll provide you with the evidence, and then we further train it with twins in your country. That doesn't mean that twins wouldn't slip through. But what will happen is the system will say the face is the same person, but when you look at the birth paper and you look at the names and you look at it, it'll be a different person. So what it does, it basically triggers to a manual process, and a person who is trained will pick it up. They will make the calls. We have found a way to automate it as well, to the respective agencies where the duplication has been picked up, and validate it themselves, and then tell the public officer in real time, because it's an 8-to-4 operation, that is a twin, proceed to approve it and send it through. So you have to deal with twins, and you have to deal with triplets, but a lot of it you could offload. Now, just to tell you how the plan is, the software is ready, but what you can do is, if you look at a database of driving license, every time you renew your driving license, your old picture is stored. So if I take the instance where one person has 2 driving licenses, that's not very difficult to pick up. The same software I'm talking about that runs on the phone is a mobile app, piece of software, is a mobile library that's embedded in the app. Also runs on the server. So I can take all of the pictures in License Office. I can run from the first driving license at 18 to the next one at 21, the next one at 30. It deals with the agent quite well. They guarantee that 10, 15 years it will recognize your age. And you could check to see if any point a driving public officer switched the face. So you can do a horizontal scan using biometric hashes. You're not using the pictures, it's not a human. You just run the software, compute all the hashes. You could even run it on a PC. Take the hash, check to see if the hash matches. You could then take each hash and compare the latest picture against all the pictures in the database and pick up all the discrepancies. Throw it into an error file, and then you check the error file manually against the primary database and clean it up. So you don't rely on a human, and that's relatively simple to do. And you do that with all the databases. Once that's done, when the person comes in on the twin and they take the picture, you can send the picture, the hash, to that other database and do a hash check, not just a demographic check. So in other words, the person in front of me, their face is the same as the face on that database. So I can do facial checks without sharing pictures. So combining that with demographic and face allows you to automate and to pick up and deal with the twins issues.
You know what I like about Devendra? He says everything is simple, but that sounded so complicated, you know?
Well, I was talking to a software engineer, so I know you'll understand it. Yeah.
So for the rest of you, I'm sorry, you know? So we have another question. Just come to the mic, identify yourself, and you could go ahead.
My name is Izan George. I'm a Service Bureau agent of the Cashees branch of DigiGov. I'm also a student at Monroe learning about computer science. And one of the things my course touches on is cybersecurity. So regarding that, I have a question. What is St. Lucia's long-term national strategy for digital sovereignty, and how will we measure whether we are truly in control of our citizens' data over the next decade?
I have a big question for you, Marlon. How do we show we're in full control?
Well, I think we were on our way with regards to your question. So I spoke earlier about two main things, or three, I could say. So we spoke of the single ICT space. That is a sub-regional policy directive that we have. And two of the main areas that can really support that outside of the political sphere is the data embassy and the IXPs. So an IXP is an internet exchange point, and what those IXPs allow is for us for our data to remain national. So once you install that IXP, all the data that's generated in St. Lucia remains in St. Lucia, right? On a transactional basis. So you send an email to another person in St. Lucia, it remains here. The other aspect of that is the data embassies. And again, when we spoke earlier, we said that with a data embassy, I am able to back up my data, my national data in another country, as it is almost like an embassy of St. Lucia in that other country. And also our own internal capacity to have our data centers here, to be able to manipulate our data and have proper legislation to support data governance and the whole idea behind data sovereignty. So over the next, I would say, 2.5 to 3 years, we will come to the point where our IXP is fully implemented. And we did have an IXP before, but it was not maintained. But we have more long-term plans, putting the institutional and the framework in place to support the long-term sustainability of the IXP for St. Lucia. So that will be coming into fruition sometime this year. And our hope is to launch the IXP during in June, at some point during Public Service Week or so. The Data Embassies project, it's well on its way, as I said earlier, through our friendly government in Taiwan. We have all of the equipment that will allow us to establish that tier-free center within a robust environment at Orange Grove. And so we have that in place as well, in addition to the data center that is being implemented as part of the Caribbean Digital Transformation Project. So we do have a lot of infrastructure going in place. And to add on to that, we've already developed our, we're in the process of developing our cybersecurity strategy. We already have a broadband strategy in place, and the implementation of that CERT and the ability to be able to monitor our network traffic in St. Lucia without the support of any of the telecom providers. So we have a lot of capacity, both human and technical capacity to support our digital data sovereignty going forward for the next 5 to 10 years.
Okay, so imagine that we're almost out of time. It's 5 minutes left. And so it's really into wrap up. So I'm going to ask each of you just one question, really. So we start off with Cleveland. So Cleveland, what role does regional harmonization of legislation play in strengthening trust and adoption? What role does regional harmonization of legislation play in strengthening trust and adoption? I guess it's adoption of framework like the NAF. Do we need to, because you remember you mentioned that if you leave St. Lucia's shores, this should be able to be something that should be carried out in Barbados. So is there a need for regional harmonized legislation?
Yes. Actually, just before coming here, I was part of a panel dealing with data in Curacao and the data vault. And that was one of the questions about international or regional regulation or cooperation. The fact is we are not doing a very good job regionally in terms of cooperation. We speak well and we have the nice language and so forth, but the reality is not so. And therefore, we recognize one person on the panel spoke, a business person spoke about the cost to that business of having to go each time to each country to understand the country's law, to understand their regulation, and even negotiate on different terms and conditions, and how wonderful it would have been if there was something that was harmonized or common. And that's not the place. The cost of doing business is high, and it would have been less, which could have been passed on to customers simply because of no common approach. In some areas, yes, it is. We within the ITU, we have worked with the region on the HIPCA project. That was the days, some of you may be too young, but in the days of cable and wireless, where we had one company alone operating throughout the region, but there was a need to liberalize the market and have the Digicel and the Flow and everybody else in your current time. It was through that project called HIPCA that we talk about regional harmonization, developing legislation, regulation, and everything else so that it was common. Just a matter of putting a country's logo and whatever towards that. And that helped to liberalize the market and to move it forward. And similarly, right now, the ITU together with CTU is working on the harmonized ICT regulation for the Caribbean region. We literally have been working for the last 2+ years, and I can tell you, moderator, it has not been easy. It has not been easy to get that done in terms of that harmonized approach. The point being, it's recognized as important, but trying to have that legislation or law for the entire region, 5, 6, 10 countries, it's difficult. It's not insurmountable. Europe has it. If Europe can do it, why not us within the region? So yes, it is important. It cuts costs. It helps us to move the agenda forward as one voice, and it takes that political will. And what I say fundamentally in everything that we do, if you give me a good leader without money, I can get the job done as long as you have the right leadership. You give me all the money, all the people, everything, and you have a terrible leader, it will, and we'll be crawling like a snail. So I put it together that it has a place, its importance, it is important, and you cannot move forward as one country. When we join together as a region, it's 20 or so coming together that would be a bigger market than our singular approach or thinking.
1, 2. So Devendra, what measurable outcomes should government track to determine if digital ID is truly improving lives?
I think that's a tricky one. I think ultimately you should be doing transaction polling. So whenever a citizen does a transaction using the EID or the NAF, you should ask them to volunteer to do some kind of survey and provide you with feedback. And then that perhaps would be a good indicator, although most people wouldn't take the option up. I think as well you should do a proper poll, a proper survey, get somebody to poll and to publish the results. And the results may or may not be good, and you have to be prepared to deal with the consequences of putting that information out there. So, because if it's bad, you can't hide it. Every 3 or 6 months or a year, you put it out and you set up the infrastructure to fix it. I think ultimately that's what's going to help you determine whether in reality citizens like what they're seeing. Anecdotal information is only so good. You need statistical data to help you determine that.
So as we roll off, we need to measure, we need to monitor,
Yes.
and also make the changes along the way, whether it is our promotion, where it is the design of the tool, or even the incentives attached.
Yeah.
So definitely great advice. And so, Marlon, where do you see St. Lucia in the next 5 years in terms of digital identity maturity?
Yeah, so in the next 5 years, I see St. Lucia fully, as a fully integrated society, as a country, where we can probably lend some of the technology and the know-how from Trinidad, where we would also have facial recognition for identity management. I think that's a very good next step going forward for digital identity management. But I also see different linkages with this. We have another sister project where we're focusing on the single window for trade, right? And that will heavily support identity. Identity management will heavily support that as well. And just ensuring that the NAF really spurs on a lot of innovation in the private sector and providing the private sector interests, opportunities to integrate with DigiGov through the regulatory sandbox that we are implementing. So I see overall that in the next 5 to 10 years, St. Lucia will be fully mature with regards to identity management systems, and also leveraging some of its, the NAF to provide some level of integration with the rest of the region. In fact, that's one point I wanted to make earlier, that with the implementation of the NAF, we did take the regional integration into account. And so the makeup of the NAF ID also is in keeping with the original concepts behind regional integration and what was established under the multipurpose ID project of a few years ago. So I see that as a full mature process for St. Lucia, and I really look forward to being with all of you on this agenda and getting the support of our minister continuously. Thank you for being here for the entire day. I guess we have that shared vision, and that I'm hoping that we can continue to get that support from you as we move forward with the agenda. Thanks again, CAPSEC, for volunteering to be part of this process as well. And I really look forward to continue working and support from the two of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So it's left for me to thank our panel, Mr. Marlon Narcis, Director, Division of Public Sector Modernization, Mr. Cleveland Thomas, ITU Area Representative for the Caribbean, Mr. Devendra Ramdarine, Digital Transformation Advisor and Independent Consultant. And we've been speaking about digital sovereignty, the future of digital citizenship. Now, as we said, the NAF has been launched, but the only way it'll be successful is for participation, for sign-on, for each of you being an advocate, an ambassador, to say, hey, this is important and we need to sign on. So let's make it happen. Let us get St. Lucia moving, as we said, du fond ensemble on that digital journey. Thank you very much. I've been your moderator, Glenn Simon. Okay, we're still live. So, okay, so now that the panel is over, now we have some prizes. So, Denise, how do we handle it? We give one to me, and then the other we will. Go to the mic. Go to the mic, yes, please. Just lower for her.
Okay, so we spoke a lot about transparency earlier on, right? So what we will do, we have the list of all the persons in the room who have registered for a DigiGov account. That is being projected onto the screen right now. And we will run it through a random bingo kind of program. And the first name that will come up will be for the tablet, and the second name for the mobile phone.
So how can I trust that system?
It will be displayed on the screen, so you could see how it is generated. It is a system it's generated by the system.
Okay, we trust
not
you.
us.
We trust you. Once my name is there,
so
we trust
if
you.
you want, you could just turn and face the screen,
I'll
and
see
you
the
will
screen
see
here.
it for yourself. So
Yes.
you know you're not listening to my voice.
Glenn, I could tell you from now that your name is not there.
Don't let him.
So we could go ahead, yes.
Yes. Okay. So Joanne, you ready? So
So we could go ahead with the draw. And what are we drawing for first? The cell phone? The tablet? The tablet is cheaper? The box is bigger. Is bigger. So we're going for the tablet first? Okay. So it is a state-of-the-art tablet that all you need to do is put your face close to it and it will do everything for you. So the bingo is ready. I'm looking at them at the back, yes. Whoa! Congratulations. So my bag is on this side. Here, my bag is on this. Sorry. You did not get the photo?
Sure. The minister. One second.
So congratulate Janelle Augustine on winning the tablet. Donated by Flo. And she has promised to deliver it to my bag across here afterwards. So we're going now for the cell phone. And it is a state-of-the-art cell phone. No, I tell you something wrong with that. I tell you something wrong with that, sister. Tell you something. You see? Janelle, okay, so one of them, Terrell Felix, Mr. Terrell Felix. All right. So you see, I gave you a chance, right? So put the phone across by my, when you. So thank you very much. So it is Thursday. It's not, today feels like Friday, but it is Thursday. But we're also inviting you to, let's mix and mingle and just have a small discussion before you leave. It might serve you well because there's a lot of traffic outside. You'll be stuck in traffic and you could be doing something better in here for a short while. So there'll be a small mixer. So please don't run as soon as we end. Thanks again. You've been a wonderful audience. Thank you again for spending the entire day with us. And share the information that you learned today with your family, your friends, your colleagues. Thank you.